chug, 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 chug,
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Wizard Staff. I'm your host Blake.
And I'm Guy.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We do drink and swear, so you have been warned. Please drink responsibly when you're playing children's card games. So tonight, Guy and I are going to be talking about the latest Rules Committee announcement in Quarter 2 here in 2020.
It's 420, baby. Blaze it. Woo. Yeah, West Coast. You know what I'm talking about?
We drink on this podcast. It's fine.
Yes. Mm-hmm. If that's your jam, though, like, go out, do it, have fun. But stay safe, and especially during these times when we're all in quarantine.
I went out, and there wasn't very much in the store, beer-wise, or alcohol-wise. But I did find this very lovely Dragon's Milk bourbon barreled aged stout, which is 11%, and it tastes like it.
Ooh, that sounds very interesting. I'm still on my Boddingtons and Guinness kick. I have, I think, one more of each, and then I will go out to the store again and get something else very generic. But that's just kind of how it's been, during these tough times.
All right, sounds good. So if any of you have been living under a rock, there was a new announcement by the Rules Committee that, in summary, there were 3 things that happened. It said that Companion works, that Lutri, the Spell Chaser, is banned, and that the card Flash is also banned.
Yeah, this was quite a shock to a lot of people. We knew that Lutri had already been banned prior to this announcement, and we knew that Companion was going to work, but we knew that there was going to be some kind of formal rules change, and so that's what this post that they had helped clarify, what that means. And then Flash also came as, I feel like, the biggest surprise.
Yes, and that's kind of like the big savory part that we're going to save towards the end. The purpose of this episode is Guy and I are going to kind of talk about these decisions and whether we agree with them or not, and just kind of go through them one by one and just really talk about them as if you're a new player to EDH, so that anyone listening, you'll understand kind of why did this happen? What's going on here? What were the factors in play going on for this to happen? We first want to start off by saying we agree with all of these decisions that were made in this update. We will explain why. If you disagree with us, like if you're just sitting there disagreeing like with the decisions, like maybe just hear us out and we'll probably explain what's going on here. So let's start off with the easy one. Let's just talk about Companion. Companion is this new mechanic that just came out in Ikoria set. And for EDH, Companions can be played from outside of your deck if you meet a deck building restriction. They can also be your commander, since they're also legendary creatures, or they can go in the 99. And if you do either of those 2 things, you don't have to worry about the deck building restriction, which is nice. So basically, when Wizards of the Coast came to the Rules Committee and let them know a bit ahead of time that these cards were coming out, the Rules Committee really had like a few options in front of them. Number 1, they could ban all the Companion cards, which, let's think about that for a moment. Like, banning 10 cards, like, that's just ridiculous. That's not really an option here.
And if you look at a lot of these cards, they're not even that particularly powerful.
It's really, I think, the one thing that, as much as EDH players disagree about things, I think we all pretty much agree the fewer the cards banned, the better. So banning 10 cards, like, it would be historical, never happened in the name of this format. That would be ridiculous. So another option is to say Companion does not work. And this option is a little bit better, generally speaking. Like, the cards could still be played as a legendary creature, as your commander, and as the 99. There's still the issue of it can't be played as the Companion mechanic, which I think most people would agree if they sat down with all 10 of the Companion cards currently in front of them, would agree that most of the deck building restrictions are reasonable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And none of them are in a way of, well, except for one, too easy where, you know, a lot of decks are going to be playing it. It's definitely just adds more to the casual side of deck building in a way. Like, it kind of reminds me of, like, all my cards in the deck have chairs in them. You have to sacrifice a bit of the competitiveness to have a companion for, I'd say, most of them.
And then there's also option 3, which is what the rules committee ended up going with, which is say companion works. Say that the mechanic works and every other aspect of the card works. I think it's going to play out all right. As you said earlier, Guy, most of the companion restrictions are very real. And to quote the rules committee, we still don't think wishes and get other cards from outside the game are something we want in Commander. We outline our stance on wishes in the FAQ, and none of the consequences or concerns we have with them applied here. We will link that in the description below, the page that the rules committee posted this, and the FAQ. And then they also said, we recognize that this does let you go past the 100 card rule that is iconic to Commander. However, a single extra card you have to jump through a serious hoops to get is philosophically okay in the same way that a tiny number of cards like Rat Colony, Relentless Rats, Shadowborn Apostle, and Persistent Petitioners are able to violate like this even more important singleton rule.
Yeah, and I'm pulling up the official announcement right here to read verbatim. Rule 11. Abilities which bring other cards you own from outside the game into the game, such as Living Wish, Spawnsire of Ulamog, Karn the Great Creator, do not function in Commander. So companions are in the exception because that's the ability that allows you to do that, whereas other cards are just grabbing from what would be your sideboard.
Yeah.
So we still do not have a sideboard.
Yeah, and I know that's the main thing people are comparing companions to is, oh, this is basically outside the game, this is basically wishes, why don't you allow wishes? Well, they are mechanically different. Like, companions are kind of like another commander where you have to meet a certain restriction and it brings itself from the outside in, versus wishes, which are on the inside, pulling something from the outside in. And you really, if you're running wishes, you really do kind of want a sideboard in mind, and they are, if you just think about it, they are very much different things, even though they at face value appear like they're very similar. That's kind of all I really have to say, because honestly, of all the things that were said in this announcement, this is the least controversial, I'd say. So I don't really want to spend too much more time on this, and I'd much rather talk about the next most important thing on the list.
And we kind of discussed this a little in our Ikoria set review episode, but that was the banning of one specific little elemental otter, Lutri the Spell Chaser. And if you need a little refresher on who that is, he is one is it legendary creature elemental otter, and the companion clause is each non-land card in your starting deck has a different name. Has flash, foreshadow there. When Lutri the Spell Chaser enters the battlefield, if you cast it, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy, and it's a 3/2, but that does not matter. So this card was just banned right out of the gates. It's the first time that the rules committee has ever done this. I have to say, like, it was a very good call for them to do, just because, like, Lutri, would go in every single deck that would have blue and red in it. It doesn't have to, give up any of the cards in order to run it. It's just like a free Dualcaster Mage-esque card that's always going to be in your starting hand.
Yeah, that's going off of that, like, Lutri was banned really because it didn't interact well with the rules, because, as you said, Guy, like, the restriction was not a restriction, and it just became a card you auto-included into any deck running red and blue. Like, in the truest sense of the word, it didn't even require a card slot. It is not really a powerful card. No matter what option the rules committee chose, whether they chose option 1, 2, or 3, which we mentioned earlier, in terms of companion, Lutri needed to be banned because the restriction is not a restriction. It's a true auto include. It's not even like Soul Ring. Soul Ring still takes up a slot in the 99. There's no downside here.
Why not let Lutri go out for the first quarter that it's available? Let's see if it is actually going to be as bad as it is. Well, the rules committee thought about that for a short bit, but they came to the conclusion that, what if, everybody needs to get their hands on this card and it just becomes so pricey, and we're almost positive that we're going to end up banning this. Like, that's just going to create a lot of feel bads. So if you did buy the otter, and then, it gets banned 4 months later, what if you had just spent $50 just for it to go to waste like that?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm no MTG finance person, but I honestly feel comfortable saying this easily could have been $100+ upon release, because it would have been that relevant in this format. I feel completely comfortable saying that, and that is ridiculous. And I know I'm kind of getting a little bit theoretical here, but I can totally imagine an alternate universe where it wasn't banned and it's completely legal, and then you talk to people and they're like, yeah, I probably should be running Lutri, but I don't want to spend $100 just to play this and it's just a really crappy dual caster mage. I don't want to do that. And then they always feel bad because they feel like they have to, and then maybe they start proxying, and it just leads to a whole bunch of situations that nobody wants to be in. Nobody wants that. Yeah.
No.
And I mean, I feel like we all kind of are on the same boat also, where we're like, oh my god, this is an adorable otter, I want to play it, it's so cute, just maybe as the 99 or the legendary at least, but if you look at it objectively, it's this really did need a hard ban.
Yeah, the one extra thing that I want to add to that is just, I've seen a lot of people saying well, why can't we make the clause banned as companion?
Which we alluded to earlier.
Right, but just for Lutri. You're creating this whole new singular rule for one singular card. There's just a lot of complications, and then it kind of gets into the fact of oh, well, you did it for Lutri, why can't you do it for XYZ when something else like this comes up? And so you just don't want to create a bunch of these rules that create very specific situations that get really hard for everyone to follow. And they're well, I mean, a really good example, I think, to just kind of solidify the fact of that is the right call, is WotC also banned this in Brawl. This big company that has access to all this data did the exact same thing, that they knew that this was going to be a problem, and they just immediately banned it in Brawl. They're not giving it the option to be your companion in Brawl, it's just banned.
And with that, I'd like to move into our last segment, which is probably the juiciest.
I would say so.
Yeah, Flash is banned.
Woo!
Woo! Any longtime listeners of this podcast will know that, especially if you listen to our last ban announcement, or lack thereof, know that Guy and I are supporters of this decision. So this one's a little bit more decisive, and I would like to kind of just take a few minutes to kind of, especially anyone who's new to the format, kind of explain, why is this happening in the first place? Why is this such a big deal?
Alright, so yes, Flash was banned, and if you don't know what it does, it is 1 and a blue for an instant. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you do, sacrifice it unless you pay its mana cost reduced up to 2 generic mana.
Yeah. In Commander, the card sees play only in the competitive end of the format. It has been a problem in EDH for a few years now, and you can basically win at instant speed, nearly uninteractable, and for only 1 and a blue. And this has resulted in lowered deck diversity and led to a lot of sandbagging in the first few turns in these competitive metas, both of which are very terrible things.
I believe I've heard some kind of statistic from some of the CEDH posts or content that I've tried to consume over the last 36 hours that like the Thrasios and Tymna decks that, you know, rely so heavily on Flash, like take up nearly half of the CEDH format.
Yeah, I'd like the exact numbers are very difficult to get your hands on, but it's definitely by feel. That's how it feels. Like, it's very dominating. It's very overwhelming. And the key cards here is Flash and Protean Hulk, which together get you creatures that will get you the win. And we don't really want to talk about exactly how the cards and rules interactions work, because that's kind of getting into the weeds, and that's a much different discussion that you should probably listen to CDH players themselves explain, because they do a very, very good job, because they know what they're talking about. They have to play against this all the time. So just look at
they're
those,
playing it.
Yeah, so like ask like the Spike Feeders or the Laboratory Maniacs or any other CDH content creator, and they will probably be happy to explain why. For the purposes of this episode, we're not going to get into the specifics, because we want to stay like main big picture here. So Flash and Protean Hulk, those are the two cards that generally get you the win. And the rules committee, like honestly, like the rules committee knew that this combo existed years and years ago. Like that's why they banned Protean Hulk, because they thought, okay, that's the solution. And they were almost right. They just banned the wrong half of the combo. They should have banned Flash years ago instead of banning Protean Hulk years ago. They were very, very close. Like, I won't give them credit. They kind of saw this like decades before it was going to happen. Because
honestly, I do kind of forget, like, what was the reason that they unbanned Protean Hulk eventually? Because if they knew that this was going to be a problem combo and they brought Protean Hulk off the list, I forget kind of like why did you do that when you know that this was going to be a problem? But that would take a little digging.
Yeah, that would just right that's kind of beyond the scope of this episode right now.
Yeah.
So I want to like also say that CDH is still EDH. We are all playing the same format, and unfortunately the language that we use, like to talk about CDH, EDH, that sounds like two different things. It's a dichotomy. They are separate formats. Like, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the rules committee, in our opinion, should ban and unban cards with CDH in mind to show that they care about all Commander players. And this banning of Flash shows that they actually do kind of care. Okay, so I would like to take just a few minutes to talk about Flash the card and just how it's kind of give a bit of historical context to the card, because I feel like this is a part of a discussion about this card that a lot of people are lacking, which I think gives you a more holistic view on this whole thing. Flash the card. It is not legal in Standard, Pioneer, Modern, Brawl, Historic, Pauper, and more. And these kind of make sense. Some of these are rotating formats, so obviously this doesn't, it's not legal in the set, and there's certain other rules within each of these other formats that make Flash not legal. But then you start getting into the few formats that it is legal in, and you realize it's restricted in Vintage, and it's also banned in Legacy. So, for those of you unaware, Vintage and Legacy are probably two of the most open-ended formats with the most minimal ban lists. And you can do almost anything. Like, these are considered some of the most powerful formats, and it's banned in Legacy, and it's restricted, meaning you can have like one copy in Vintage. And so that's absurd. Like, these are the most powerful formats, and you can still like not play this card almost at all. One of the last formats that it's kind of being able to play is a format called Canadian Highlander. If you've never heard of it, it's basically EDH, except it's 1v1. It starts you at 20 life, and there is no commander in the command zone. And instead of having a ban list, there's the obvious silver border, anti, and conspiracy cards. But other than that, every other card is legal, except they are pointed, meaning you can have up to 10 points of cards, and some cards have a certain number of points. The idea being, you have a small handful.
An allowance.
You have an allowance. You have a small handful of cards that you can play in your deck that are really powerful. And so, in Canadian Highlander, there are only Flash is 6 out of 10 points, which is a lot. There are only 4 other cards that are higher pointed, and each of them are at 7, just 1 point higher. And they are Ancestral Recall, Black Lotus, Time Vault, and Time Walk. Insanely powerful cards banned in almost every format. And here's Flash, just like 1 point below all of them. So I hope that this kind of illustrates that Flash is, and then Commander was the last format this card was basically allowed to be played in. And now it's finally been banned. The history of this card is insane, and I'm surprised in that context it's taken this long.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to me that... Do you know actually what the second most played deck on EDH Rec that uses Flash is?
I do not. Why don't you tell me?
It is Rayami. And it uses it just because Rayami wants to get cards into the graveyard. So it's a cheap way of having to pretty much put a creature into the graveyard so Rayami could get, I don't know, Menace.
That's actually a really good transition, and it's a really good talking point people have been saying, where, okay, sure, Flash is really used in all these competitive metas, but you can totally play Flash in casual, right? Rayami. Yeah. The issue here is that alright, maybe 10 people were doing that in casual. Oh, okay, I'm kind of being a devil here. Obviously a few people were playing it in casual, but it really, really was hindering competitive EDH metas. Where it was just it was literally warping that end of the format.
If you weren't playing it, it's almost like someone had almost a full lap ahead of you head start kind of deal.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. So can we talk now about the two major concerns? Because this came out and people have obviously responded, and at least as far as we can tell, there's two major kind of counterpoints to Flash being banned. So do we want to address that now?
Yes, let's go into it. The first one being CEDH should be its own format apart from EDH. Blake, I don't know about you, but that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, it's about as dumb as smashing your face with bricks.
I want you, as you're listening, to think of another format that's done that in Magic's history. I'm gonna give you I could give you an hour, but I don't need to because I know that your answer is gonna be, yeah, no one else has done that. So why do we need to make this completely separate distinction for quote-unquote CEDH when it's literally the exact same thing as EDH, except you're just playing at a higher power level? We talked about earlier how companion or banning Lutri as companion just creates a very singular rules distinction that makes it kind of difficult or complicates things, where then creating a whole new format that's so close already to EDH, and then what do? Do you just hold an EDH tournament and then a CEDH tournament on different days? No, it's something where you want people to be able to come together all as one and be kind of unified under one umbrella, where there's just no hard distinction between the two where that would make sense.
Yeah, and I'm going to elaborate on that, which is, okay, EDH and CEDH should be their own formats. This is dangerously ignorant, is how I would describe it. Because most EDH players they pretty much stay in their corner. Either they play casually or they play competitively. They really like different aspects of different ends of the format. That's fine, but I feel like people only kind of see from their point of view. As someone who frequently plays very casually, semi-casually, semi-competitive, and competitive, I play across all of those. There is no line. There isn't. It is a spectrum. There is no, it's a gradient. There is no clear line distinguishing these like ideas that there's two formats. There's just not. If you tried to create two different formats, let's say you did, like, okay, the super competitive players go over here and the super casuals go over here. Well, then now each group would start having fights. Like the competitives would be like, oh, you're way too casual, get over there. And then the casual people would be like, oh, you're way too strong, get the hell over there. And like that would lead to even more problems because there is no dichotomy. Unfortunately, I do think the language we use like enforces this idea, but there is no dichotomy. It is a spectrum, and we are all EDH players. We might have slightly different goals in a game, but like we still, at the end of the day, we're all EDH players.
Exactly. So now, what's the second argument, though, Blake?
So the second main argument is that this banning of Flash, it sets a bad precedent that the next best CEDH cards will be banned. And I kind of understand why these people are scared. They see that, you know, a few very loud people on the internet are saying, please do this, and then the rules committee does that. And they're like, oh, well, are you just going to listen to like tons of small voices and just let them like ban cards left and right? Because again, most EDH players generally agree banning cards is bad. Like we want that to happen as little as possible.
Yes, and I'm gonna again read directly from the website because I think, you know, I don't understand like why people are scared, because if you read, you know, the announcement, it kind of solidifies that this isn't going to become a normal. Though they represent a small fraction of the Commander player base, we are willing to make this effort for them. It should not be taken as a signal that we are considering any kind of change in how we intend to manage the format. This is an extraordinary step and one we are unlikely to repeat.
I know some people are concerned, like, okay, they got rid of Flash. Well, now they're just, the next best thing is going to become like the next OP thing, and they're just going to ban that. They're talking about cards like Tainted Pact, Demonic Consultation, Thassa's Oracle, Ad Nauseam, and those are the next kind of best power cards of that format, yes, but they're not nearly to the same level as Flash was. Flash was warping the meta. This was a specific card that was being like identified for years, like the problem card. It's sort of like Tainted Pact, Demonic Consultation, Thassa's Oracle, and Ad Nauseam. They're all in the second story of a building, and they push you off. Yeah, you might hurt your legs, but you'll be fine. Flash was on the 10th floor, pushing you off, guaranteeing you will die. Like, there's almost no way you live through it.
Yeah, the example that I have, and it's a much more niche and weeb example, but if you are into My Hero Academia, you could imagine Flash as All Might. Now, the next best thing, I don't know what would that be in CDH, but whatever that is, that's Endeavor. No matter what Endeavor did, there was no way that he was going to catch up to All Might. The only way Endeavor was able to become the #1 hero was All Might had to retired, or in this case, banned. The distinction, or like, you know, the gaping chasm between the two should illustrate how much of there is between, you know, what's the next best thing.
Ooh, woo, that's quite an example. But yeah, overall, we do agree with this decision. Like the few concerns that are surrounding this card are not really warranted. Like, don't worry, they're not going to start banning a whole bunch of CDH cards. And no, we should not split off into two different formats. That is like dangerously naive. Overall, I feel like all of these decisions were a very good idea.
I would encourage everyone to listen to a lot of the reasons why CEDH players wanted this band, go to like CEDH Cast, probably go to like CEDH TV, follow some people on Twitter, and you'll just see like how overwhelmingly happy they are that this is the case. They've been fighting for this for a long time. I've heard many of them say that they're very excited to see, diversity in their format again, just because, Flash just ate up so much of it. A lot of the things that were once so good and kind of fell behind because of Flash, now we're going to be able to like kind of dust off the books and, let those see the light again.
This is kind of its own topic, but I'll just kind of wrap things up. Some of you may not feel like CDH deserves a voice, and you're just wrong. Even though they are a small portion of the community, they are still a valid group and deserve to be heard by deciding decision makers of any kind. And we all are the same players. It's all this conflict is just it makes me laugh, because it's like all this conflict does not need to happen. All this drama does not need to happen. We're all in this together. Just stop.
Yeah, it's not just the fact that it's like this is the CEH community voicing their opinions. They're EDH players. They deserve every right as much as you do when it comes to expressing their own concerns.
All right. Well, with that, we are going to wrap things up. We are the Wizard Staff Podcast. You can listen to us on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. You can contact us at Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. All those links are going to be in the description.
Yep. Twitter handle WizardStaff101. Email is thewizardstaff101@gmail.com. And then same thing for Instagram, and we are on Facebook. Give us a like, shout out, subscribe to us on all of your podcast feeds, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right, peace.